So thank you so much, and thank you for the introduction, Margaret. And it's great to see you. It's great to see the people that I can on the screen. There's nothing worse when you're given these things than just seeing blank screens, like you're talking into the abyss. So thank you so much. And first, I just want to say apologies because this was rescheduled. I was quite unwell a couple of months ago, and I wasn't able to do this. So I appreciate those people that have come back to join again. And I'm really thankful to you, and I'm really excited to be delivering this. So I think really, first of all, before I give a bit of an introduction, I'm just going to talk about really the objectives of this session. So we're going to be, I'm going to try and give you a real foundation in the key principles of inquiry-based learning. Inquiry-based learning is, like most things in education, it's a real plethora of pedagogical strategies and history, and there's a lot out there about it. And I just hope that this session just plants that little seed for you to want to go and explore more. I'm hoping to also as well share some, inquiry-based learning in action. I've got quite a few slides that say IBL in action. And that's sort of things that I've done and what my colleagues have done and what I've learned from my experience. And one of the most wonderful things, one of my friends who's a teacher says, she calls them trinkets when you take things from other teachers. If you see any trinkets or things that you like that I say, please do steal, okay? Steal any strategies that I'm sharing with you, any things that any practices, it's all about sharing in our profession. And finally, it's just really to inspire you to potentially use inquiry-based learning in your own practice. So really, you can do a bit of an inquiry into me now. So yeah, I'm at Nord Anglia International School. I'm head of primary humanities, so that's history and geography. And they are taught in humanities lessons. However, we do have a bit of a sort of topic-based approach that humanities topics in our school do echo over into and overspill into other areas of the curriculum as well. And we've been working in education for 11 years. And I began my career in London. I was actually a music teacher at first and then worked my way into the elementary sort of classroom, the primary classroom. And I've been in Hong Kong now for 4 years. Just completed, I'm an eternal student, I call myself. I've just completed my second master's. This is in international education. I've just started my PhD, which I'm really excited about. And I've completed inquiry-based learning training with the International Baccalaureate Organization and someone who I will be quoting a lot today, who is Kath Murdoch. And I actually listened to a podcast recently and someone referred to her as the Beyonce of inquiry-based learning. And she really is. She's a real kind of a pinnacle, a figure that I think is amazing. I hope you're inspired to look into her today. So first of all, I'd like to try and make this maybe a little bit interactive if you can. Margaret, I can't actually see the chat for some reason, so I don't know if maybe you can share, if anyone does want to type. It's just a little exercise. So as a teacher, I think it's important that we inquire into ourselves, So which profession best matches your teaching style and why? And it would be lovely if, I don't know if Margaret, if you could share some things, if anything's put in the chat. If not, just get thinking. I would love some feedback. Inquiry-based learning, it relies a lot on feedback. So if you're just looking at these pictures, how do you kind of see yourself? What who do you most relate to when you're in class? What kind of profession?
We got one from the chat,
Yeah.
Chris, movie director, preparing them for the real world.
Okay. So I'm thinking, like, could you compare yourself to a profession, like, or a job? I know, like, teaching is a job, but do you come from more of the approach of maybe like an architect? You're sort of designing things. Are you a builder? Are you do you see yourself sort of building knowledge? What do you kind of see yourself as?
Or you can unmute yourself as well.
Yeah,
Have to just type.
exactly. Yeah, thank you. You can build yourself.
Maybe
Unmute yourself. Yes, please do. Go ahead.
okay. Maybe some kind of director, some kind of
Okay, I like that.
Yeah. So using my vocation, my degree that I trained in to give them some ideas about what they want to be when they're older and how they can use English kind of
I love that. So kind of inspiring students. Think of the future.
Yes, trying to, because when I was in school, I really couldn't see the point. I mean, I enjoyed school, but I couldn't see the point of them beyond the classroom. I just enjoyed the lessons as lessons. But so I tried to make it realistic and say, no, some of these things will be useful in your job in ways you don't really, in ways you haven't realized yet. I'm trying to help you realize.
I like this. I like the kind of angle, kind of the inspiration stuff. We'll be tapping on that a bit more later. I'm going to just go to the next slide now. And basically, I'm going to ask the question again, but I'm going to frame it more about an inquiry teacher. So now, which profession do you think best matches what we would call an inquiry teacher? And if you go out of this webinar and you start researching elsewhere, the phrase inquiry teacher is used a lot in the literature, and people do refer to themselves as inquiry teachers. So if you were to kind of put an inquiry teacher in a box, which kind of profession, which kind of job do you think most relates to an inquiry teacher? Feel free to type or unmute. Please do get chatting. I'd love that.
Something like a journalist. So it's something, uses the Socratic method somewhat, a kind of interrogator. So you're
interesting.
Socratic targeted questioning to direct students in the correct way. So rather than telling them it's wrong, you're saying, is that the correct answer, and getting them
along the right lines. Yeah, along the right lines, definitely.
We have another answer from Daniel.
Please do, Margaret. Please share. Sorry.
Daniel said artist.
Artist. Okay, so more of the creative. Yeah, we'll come back to creativity later. I'm going to give that the awful answer, which is there's no right or wrong answer, really. But I would say this. What I think, I like the gardener, okay? And the first thing that I'd like to speak about with you is inquiry teachers. And if you are practicing inquiry-based learning, you actually kind of need to remove that word teacher, okay? You're more of a facilitator. You're a facilitator. Yeah, and you know what? In some ways, I'm sure you are already. You're already doing this. You facilitate learning. It's what a teacher does. But I always think of the gardener, and I think of the gardener because and it's not because I was teaching plants today even to my class, and I thought about, you know, the student with plants, you have to take care of them. You have to provide the soil. You have to provide, you know, water, the right environment. You're facilitating their growth, and that's very related to inquiry-based learning. Okay, so sorry, we're all interactive. See, think, wonder, thinking routine. I think you've probably seen one of these before in these webinars. We love doing this at our school. So it's I see, that's literally what you see, the facts. What do you see? What do you think? What do you think? What do you think it is? I think this. But the one to focus on, especially for the purpose of today's webinar, is the wonder. What do you wonder? Because that's what you question. And the sentence stem that I always use when I do this in class is I ask the students to respond by saying, I wonder if, I wonder what, I wonder why. Okay? Especially in Hong Kong, you know, if we're teaching English language, it's always good having those sentence stems just to scaffold the vocabulary and how to respond to this. So once again, I'd love it if you could respond to this in some way. I'm sorry, Margaret. Again, I can't see the chat for some reason, so I'm relying on you. I'm sorry about that.
No problem. There's no one in the chat yet.
Okay. I'm thinking you're probably thinking, I see a boy and what looks like a cat. I think they are hiding. I think they are peeking at something. But the I wonder what, I wonder, you know, I would think what maybe, I teach very young children. I teach 5- and 6-year-olds this year, and I appreciate that we've probably got lots of secondary teachers here as well. But this is all relatable. You can do these things. My children would probably say, oh, I wonder if they've got in trouble and they're hiding or something like that. You know, maybe they're a bit mischievous.
There's someone putting in the chat. I see a cat child. I think they are hiding. I wonder why. And then Chris asks, is there a guitar in the reflection in his eyes?
Oh, interesting. So you could say, I wonder if that's a guitar in the reflection of his eye. I wonder if the boy plays guitar because of this, you know. The more abstract, the better. you know, you want to get those really creative thoughts from the students. I'm going to skip ahead. So this is actually a piece of artwork called Curiosity. And it's by Svetlana Vorobyeva, and I love this because it sums up a child's curiosity. And I love that there's the kind of animal next to them as well, because to me, it relates curiosity to, that could be like, it could, if you're thinking abstract, and that sort of an imaginative animal, or a friend, sort of the collaborative aspect as well. And I love this quote by Einstein. And I think what you need to notice with this quote is that Einstein, you know, he puts the focus on the passionately curious, and that's the driving force here. And it's like, it isn't just inspiration, it's like it's kind of our mandate. You know, he's one of the greatest minds, and he doesn't credit his talent, he credits his curiosity. So in inquiry-based learning, curiosity isn't a bonus. I like to see it as an engine. It transforms students from being like passive receivers, so just sitting there listening, to being active explorers. And that's what I think this piece of artwork, Curiosity, reminds us of. So it's like, what is our role in this, you know? And that's what we're going to be exploring today. We're going to go back now to, you know, my slides are just, oh, there we go. Sorry about that. Curiosity in children, where it all starts. So I'm going to be referring to psychologist Susan Engel quite a lot. She's a phenomenal writer. She's a behavioral psychologist, and I'll recommend her book later on. But this is one of her quotes. And if we look closely at this quote, this is child psychologist Susan Engel. She says, babies are driven instinctively to study unfamiliar people, objects, events in order to make the new familiar. And this isn't just about babies, it's about humanity's most vital survival skills, you know? Curiosity is our biological imperative. So from infancy, we're wired to explore, question, and adapt. And why is that? So it's because curiosity turns the unknown into the known. It transforms threats into opportunities. It's how we learn to walk, talk, and navigate our world. So if we think about it, you know, a baby kind of scrutinizing new faces, a toddler testing gravity when they drop food on the floor, and in essence, a child or one of your students asking the question, why? You know, why? That's why I always go back to that question, I wonder why. And it's kind of like an evolutionary instinct. So curiosity drives us to seek food, avoid danger, you know, build tools, create communities. It's the engine behind our discovery, innovation, and adaptation in human history. So sort of in essence, I would say that curiosity is sort of how we stay alive. You know, it's how we learn from the very beginning. And curiosity is at the heart of inquiry-based learning. It's what we're kind of cradling, those natural survival human instincts from that little baby reaching there in that picture. That's what we want to really nurture. But kind of what does it mean to be curious? And I think in a kind of, you know, black and white answer, closed mind, curious mind. You know, so at the core of curiosity is more than just asking questions. It's a fundamental mindset, a way of approaching the world and information of ourselves. And as these visuals powerfully illustrate, there's a stark contrast between the closed mind and the curious mind. So if you look at the traits on the left, the closed, we'll see things like no self-reflection, oblivious, wants to be right, defensive, judgmental, reacts, fixed view, assumes, and sort of seeing feedback as an attack. You know, this mindset is characterized, you know, by certainty, perhaps a bit of ego, resilience to anything that challenges the existing worldviews, static, you know, it's closed. But the curious is a complete contrast. We're thinking of being reflective, self-reflective, self-aware. You know, maybe wants to get it right, but not completely sure. You're on a journey together. Receptive, welcomes diversity, responds, opens to new views, being open-minded. And this mindset is the one that thrives in terms of exploration. It embraces the uncertainty as an opportunity, values different perspectives, and sees every interaction, especially critical feedback, as valuable data for growth. And this key thing is that it is dynamic. Now, there's a lot on the screen on this slide. This book is probably one of the best books I have ever read as a teacher, and you can find it in Hong Kong Public Library, and that is a link to it there. Okay, and the title sums it up: The Hungry Mind. Now, this is a really powerful quote, but the part that I want you to focus on, and when I first read this, it really hit home for me, and it was teachers tend to squelch curiosity. I have definitely squelched curiosity as a teacher in the classroom, unintentionally, just because the nature of the curriculum that I teach, the environment, and the kind of social norms of the style of education that we teach. That's okay, but it's about recognizing it. So what does this mean? So we often prioritize certainty, the right answers, over exploring uncertain questions, especially ones that we can't answer, okay? Modeling matters, okay? So your responsibility is to model the incorrect. It's okay to get it wrong, and it's okay if you as a teacher don't know the answer, and we'll come back to this later. The irony is that few teachers realize that they're doing this. So it's like phrases like, not now, stick to the topic. These things are all the squelching of the curiosity. And it matters in inquiry-based learning because it requires the embracing of the unknown. And if we unintentionally stifle curiosity, our inquiry-based learning activities lose their spark. So I see this as kind of Susan Engel's call for action, and it's all about modeling curiosity in the ways that I just did to you, you know, the modeling why, you saying that you're questioning things. And the way that we can do that really is to think about questions. Questions are one of the main elements of inquiry-based learning, and they are powerful, incredibly powerful. I've got some quotes on the screen. Feel free to read them. Mackenzie, that book there, Trevor Mackenzie, I'll put some at the end of the presentation. I can share these with you. He's another prominent writer, very approachable writing as well, and very practice-based. You can literally open his book and take things out and put them in your classroom. And curiosity is driven by questions. You know, students always asking questions. And as Trevor Mackenzie says, the most powerful shift you can make to adopt inquiry into your practice is to begin learning with a question. So, starting with a question. Trevor Mackenzie has this concept of ungoogleable questions. And I love this because it's like a question that isn't meant to be answered. And I know that probably sounds crazy in some respects, but it's a question that's meant to drive the learning deeper, that you can craft or you craft with your children. So it's basic. I love the part that says, you know, essential questions cannot be answered in a single lesson. They require high order thinking and may raise additional questions. So, you know, why does this matter? Well, they defy quick answers. You know, no right answer in the results bar. You can't get the answer on Google. They evolve, they self-propagate. You know, so one great question leads to the inquiry, which will then spark into more questions. And that's that kind of higher level thinking as well. It goes into the deeper thinking. So it forces analysis, prediction, and the inference. So no copy and paste. You know, you can't go and Google, there's no copy and paste here. It embraces the uncertainty, coming back to that curious mind. And that's okay. It's okay to be uncertain about something. And it sustains the curiosity. So, you know, students live in the curious mindset, like as we discussed. What's another approach? what's the lesson here going underneath? So craft questions that can't be Googled. I'm going to give an example of this. I actually, so as I said, I teach year 1 in the British system, which is 5 and 6 years old. And we revamped one of our units of study for history. The unit of study was based on childhood and toys from the past, but we turned it into an inquiry unit. And what you can see at the table there is a planning table with year 1 students working with year 6 students. So 5 and 6-year-old students working with 10 and 11-year-old students. And together they crafted this ungoogleable question, which is, how will learning about past and present childhood experiences help us prepare for the future? Whoa, and you might think that for a 5-year-old to handle that. But do you know what? They could, because from that, we developed these concepts. So concepts in inquiry-based learning are central to organizing ideas for instruction. So they help students develop deep understanding, make connections to other subjects and real-world situations. So a concept needs to be broad, abstract, and it's kind of an enduring principle or idea that is not limited to a specific subject or time. I know that sounds like a massive definition, but if you look at these, play. Where's play evident? In school. Play is evident in the playground. Play is also evident at home. Play is evident playing video games. Play is evident in the classroom. Play involves collaborating together, having fun. And, and that should actually be on another line. We had the idea of time as well, time as a concept. So play, learning, fun, time, concepts. How are we going to unpack those? And then probably like you, and what I should have said this at the start, I don't teach in a school that is an inquiry-based curriculum. I take these things and I embed them. And you can do that. I don't teach an international baccalaureate primary years program school. This is not an inquiry-based curriculum. It's the British curriculum, and it is standards-based. We have curriculum standards. And this is often a contention in inquiry-based learning. But I brought this to the planning table, and I actually brought the planning documents down for the year 6s, the older students, to see, and we unpacked this together. What curriculum standards could we perhaps hit in year 1 history by doing this? And a lot chronologically, looking at toys from the past, comparing and contrasting, and naturally through the exploration of these concepts, we were able to achieve these curriculum standards together. And that was what was so wonderful about this. We're now going to move on to provocations, and provocations are, they're really a powerful tool, and you might have heard of this phrase before. So think of provocations as intellectual sparks, the fireworks. It might be an intriguing image, a puzzling artifact, a thought-provoking video, an open-ended question. Those ungoogleable questions, they're provocations in themselves. These are all carefully chosen or developed together to connect deeply with the current topic of exploration, okay? So when we present these to the students, they ignite curiosity and wonder. Curiosity, wonder, keywords. But here's the real value of them for us as the educators. So provocations reveal what students already know, what they're questioning, and where their interests lie. So we've got a level of formative assessment there. We're assessing what they know, what they're interested in. Are they interested? Are they curious about this? Does it spark wonder, the questioning? And that insight becomes our compass in inquiry-based learning practices. It shows us how we shape future learning experiences and where to guide the inquiry journey. So in short, provocations invite wonder, uncover thinking, and they help us to inform decisions about the path ahead. In my school, we start a unit in any subject. We start it with what we call a hook, okay? Literally, like you're getting a fishing rod and you're casting it out and you want to hook the learners in. with a provocation, something that's going to spark wonder. And I've just got some examples of those here now. So we've got provocations to hook learning at the start of a unit of study. They can be really useful to introduce the units and create the, and I love these phrases, the awe and wonder. So what we've got there, we've got a picture of children feeling frozen toys, frozen sea creatures from Antarctica, frozen. And this was just in their classroom and when they arrived. And we looked at it. You yourself have to model the curiosity. You have to model the questioning. You have to be the actor, be like an actor, like, you know, as a teacher, like the professions at the start. And oh my goodness, what is this? You know, and then together we unpack this. I asked the students to go and get tools to dig into the ice. And I'm asking them to ask questions about what these things are. What do they think is going on? What do they see? What do they wonder? And then the second picture below that, the boy writing on the flip chart paper with the picture of the rainforest and the lungs. This was at the start of a topic in geography and science about the rainforest. And I deliberately chose abstract pictures of the rainforest. And I did an exercise, what we call a chalk talk. So the students were told to come into the classroom in silence with a pen. They walk around the tables. There's on the tables are all these provocations, all these abstract pictures. You know, I had pictures of people in tribes from the Amazon rainforest, this picture of the lungs, and they write their thinking, what they know, what they wonder. And it's all in silence. And then we bring it back. We bring it back to the front and we explore it together and we unpack it together. And what they've written on those pages is what shapes the planning in the unit as we go along, going back to, you know, the ungoogleable questions, the curriculum standards, and the concepts that we draw from that. I'm going to talk about immersive experiences. One thing that I really love to do is to really immerse the children in learning situations that can really simulate things. I often compare, sometimes the classroom needs to be a bit like Disneyland. You know, like when you go to Disneyland, if you go on Space Mountain, you know you're in space. You're immersed in it. And I love being creative in the classroom to kind of simulate situations. And this one was one that I did where we created an ice cave. So we have a room, an empty classroom, built an ice cave, put the AC on the lowest temperature possible, brought the fans down, even though I think it was in the summer, told the children that they need to bring in, you know, what do we need to bring in? We're going to go on an ice adventure. They came in with scarves, hats, and we explored the ice cave together and we had some little story times in the ice cave. And from that, this led to the children wanting to learn more about Antarctica. So we decided to make an iceberg, and that's what they did there. We made that in class. And from that, they wanted to learn about penguins. So we wrote letters to Ocean Park. And that was a whole unit of study, of inquiry that came from me just putting a sheet over some chairs and putting the AC down low. So, and simulating this experience. I think one of the best examples in our school of doing this is this kind of dragon invasion that is a writing unit of study where the night before, it's very exciting. We do this in year 2, and the night before the teachers trash the classrooms, literally, and we simulate a dragon invading the classroom. The children arrive to school the next day thinking, oh my goodness, what on earth has happened here? And of course, there is that element of naivety with young children that you can do this. They believe that a dragon has invaded the classroom. And the teachers make this absolutely ridiculous video, which I have been part of, which is them being there when it's happened, you know, like a vlog of it just happening, the dragon invasion. Oh my goodness, you won't believe what's happened. And, you know, there's sound effects. And again, the students are in that awe and wonder, the shock. I mean, I think one of my colleagues actually went, if you see on the screen behind it, they've frozen on the screen the claw marks that the dragon has scratched the screen and it's scratched. Anyway, what's the point in this? Well, actually, in the video that we make, we deliberately model vocabulary that the children are going to be using in the writing as a result of this dragon invasion. We deliberately, that's this kind of scaffolding, we deliberately put in the videos models verbally of the writing that is a result of the dragon invasion experience. And these are just some examples of the writing that they write at the end. So if you look, the pictures on the right of the dragon invasion are at the start, and the pieces of writing are assessed pieces of writing at the end. And again, we go back to curriculum standards. At the end of the day, I need to see if the children are making progress. So this is in their writing assessment book, and I'm using this to tick off curriculum standards as I'm going through. I've embedded my inquiry to fulfill standards. So let's get back to being maybe a bit more interactive. So what are your thoughts? Is there a unit of study that you are about to teach? Could you be creative? Could you implement something of an immersive level? I realize that I've said things that are perhaps related to younger learners, but I remember one of my colleagues in the UK was teaching secondary students about refugees and the third world, and she actually one day removed all of the chairs from the classroom and, you know, tried to, what would it be like if you only had limited resources? So there are the kind of parallels there. So if you have any ideas for things that, you know, even just some thoughts, how could you put this into your learning, into your lessons that you're about to teach? Are there any ideas that perhaps you've had after I've shared this with you? Feel free to share or unmute. It's okay if not. Oh. I always like inspiring other things as well. So if you have any questions about things that you're about to teach, which you'd like some inspiration for.
Chris put something in the chat. Something to do with technology, creating a 3D model of the classroom and use AR technology to turn the classroom into Pokemon Go with 3D printed monsters.
Right, nice. How would I approach that as a kind of hook, a provocation? I would maybe get my kids to go on a Pokemon Go hunt around the school. Turn the school into a Pokemon Go gym. I know in the UK they were in really random places, so I'm pretty sure a school could be a Pokemon Go gym. You know, how could you get the children interested in that? Thanks for sharing that. I'm going to move on because I'm cautious. I've spoken quite a lot about this. I'd like to just say that provocations aren't necessarily always at the start. And if we remember back to that quote from Susan Engel about teachers squelching curiosity, all of those things that often distract learning, what you might view as distracting, and sometimes they are a distraction. You know, sometimes we do need to get on with the maths lesson, and that's okay. But they're provocations in themselves. And I actually went on some training in Beijing with Kath Murdoch, who did that quote at the bottom there about the role of the adult is nurturing children's curiosity and how critical that is. And for example, when I came back from the training, the following day that I was in class, we were all in class and I was teaching a lesson, and some sirens went past the school. We could hear it. I don't know if it was a ambulance or a fire engine, but the children just all looked, and I thought, hang on a second, let's pause what I'm doing. And I said, oh, I wonder what that is. What do you think that is? And it was just like I opened the can of worms, that, well, not even can of worms really, because it was like I opened a box of butterflies, let's say. And all of these wonderful things and the conversations that we had together, because the children was like, oh, I think it's a fire engine. You know, I think something's happened. And I said, well, what do you wonder about that? You know, and then we had things, oh, I wonder if someone's in trouble. I wonder if someone's hurt. then we ended up in conversations about a secret agent in Central, and you know, and but it was lovely just to have this moment. It was only a couple of minutes, and then we reeled it back in, and we got on with what we were doing. But it was just that, you know, that was my effort to not kind of squelch the curiosity, and it's just about having space to just enable the children to have those wonderings at those random moments and just kind of cherish those. As I said, wonderings. I love this phrase. This is a kind of Kath Murdoch thing as well. And I often scaffold this by encouraging the children to wonder as much as possible, presenting them with abstract pieces of art, provocations, to get them thinking. And actually kind of, you have to kind of train them to do that, to use the language. And I use sentence ends there, like as I said before, I wonder why, I wonder if, I wonder how, I wonder where, I wonder who. All those kind of questions are, so I'm embedding that questioning even more. So we've got all these questions, we've got all these wonderful things happening. It's important that we make this thinking visible. Well, I think one of the best the best pieces of stationery for teachers that doing that kind of embed inquiry-based learning into their practice is the sticky note. And if you go to my classroom, there are sticky notes absolutely everywhere, because I use them to signpost and visually represent the thoughts, wonderings, questions of the children. And you must have heard this already, but Harvard's Project Zero is just an absolutely the most fantastic resource, full of wonderful strategies. And you can get to it via that QR code about making thinking visible. And the making thinking visible and inquiry-based learning go hand in hand, because we want to put on our walls those things that display and model the curious thinking of the children. I'm going to move now into agency. So let's dive deeper now and let's think about agency. So it's not what students learn, but it's about how they engage with the learning journey. Some key words here: voice, choice, ownership. Ownership is sometimes interchanged with responsibility. Voice, choice, ownership. In any lesson, I always question to myself, I ask myself, how am I giving my students voice? How am I giving them choice? Could say that as differentiation as well. How are you scaffolding? How are you pushing your higher abilities? How are you challenging? But most importantly, how are they owning that? How are they, you know, being receptive to that? Are they interested in it? There's the ownership and responsibility. Are they interested in what's going on? And I think agency turns curiosity into a capability. So how can we cultivate that in our classroom? I'm going to talk now about the pedagogy of release, which could be an entire webinar series on its own. So we have this gradual release model. You might have heard of this before. It's the I do, we do, you do. When you think of inquiry-based learning and the kind of ownership and independence, the agency that the children have, I love the kite analogy. Okay, it's down to you as the teacher for how much you are going to facilitate that kite flying. Yeah, it's up to you how high it flies. And it doesn't matter where it is. And the kite can go higher and it can go lower. And that kind of pedagogy of release is, how are you empowering your learners by modeling the curiosity? You know, I do, we do it together as a group. Maybe like a guided practice together, to the you do, the independent application. So I'm going to just now combine this with another analogy, and this is Trevor Mackenzie and one of his sketch notes on his website. It's full of these fantastic graphics, which are just so digestible if you're someone like me that likes visuals. And if we apply that more to inquiry-based practices, he has the swimming pool. Obviously, it's pretty self-explanatory, but we have the structured inquiry, where the children are in the shallow end, they're holding on to the sides, and that's like the teacher with them in the pool, you know, engaged with the entire class, leads the inquiry. Controlled inquiry, teacher chooses topics, identifies resources, and the guided inquiry. Now, I would say my experience is more with the guided inquiry. And as I started off as putting more inquiry into my lessons, it was a new way of teaching for me. And I did start more with structured inquiry because that was my transition and my journey into inquiry-based learning. I would start more with structured, and then as I developed my practices, I felt more confident to take more risks and enable the children to take more risks with their learning, controlled, then guided. And I have experimented with free inquiry as well. And I've got some examples of this here and how perhaps you can facilitate these in your classrooms. I've just picked a couple of the inquiries. So the structured inquiry, it's a small picture, but on the board there, I actually made a kind of work surface. It was for a geography lesson. It was part of that rainforest unit of study for geography and in science lessons. This was actually a geography lesson. And on that desk there, I made a geographer's desktop, and there's like a National Geographic magazine there, and there are some QR codes there. And it's a structured inquiry because I've directed the students in the learning. I've given them the resources, you know, especially with e-safety as well, and, you know, what's appropriate for children to be exploring and researching on the internet. And I gave them the resources to drive their inquiry. I knew the information that they were going to be able to find on these websites, and with their iPads, and they scanned that and they made fact files about the particular part of the rainforest that we were studying. Then the guided inquiry, if we take that further, they've actually got their more kind of abstract sheets, a scaffolded fact file, and I left it to them now to then find the facts. I'm just guiding them along the way. It's up to them what information they want to put down on their sheet. And then the free inquiry is, we actually just had a session where we basically just got loads of creative resources, and I said, make me the rainforest. Make it. So we got junk modeling. We just went crazy. And some of the things looked very questionable in themselves, but there was perhaps some abstract thinking behind it, and some was just this complete burst of creativity and seeing a different side of the students, which I didn't know was there, which was wonderful. So enabling agency, a way that we can do that is having the children as researchers, and all of those examples that I've just shown here in the first two. You want the children to be finding out the information themselves. You want them to be finding out and uncovering their own knowledge, because it's a higher level of thinking, and it has that agency. It gives them the ownership, and it's them leading the discovery of their expedition, where they're going. And it comes back to this idea of you facilitating. What are you doing? What are you resourcing? How are you facilitating the inquiry? How are you facilitating where the learning is going? How are you facilitating their agency? How are you facilitating them as researchers? So that bottom bullet point there is something that I do really love to do, especially because my school, we teach, you know, it might be like yours. We have subjects. We might learn history. We'll learn geography. We'll learn maths. But I like putting the students in the shoes of professionals within that subject. So today we're going to be historians. We're going to be historians. Yes, you're at school, but you're going to be a historian. What does a historian need to do? What makes a good historian? And then that gives them ownership. It adds another layer to them going on their research. Well, how does a historian research? Oh, a historian looks at primary and secondary sources. What primary and secondary, you know, can you get chronology involved in this? And this is just a method, a way of doing this. So I've got student research in action here. And I've got there at the top a trip that was Kadoorie Farm. The students are researching for an enrichment activity. They're going out, they're looking at the different exhibits and things that they've got there, the animals and the life that's there. And that was for a science trip looking at animal habitats. touched on it before, but looking at using the iPads, and actually there we were researching global cultures for their writing, and they were generating stories for an idea, and they were looking at different symbols of global cultures, and they were looking at Asia and Asian symbols, and that drove their writing inquiry. The bottom left is actually going out into our local park. We've been out a couple of times this year to look at seasonal changes in science and to see how the life in the park has changed, what the weather is like, and analysing those things. And also, some people do see it as going old school, but let's get out, the books and encyclopedias, the globes, go to the library. What resources do we have in school? And the final picture there on the bottom right is building a bridge to balance toy cars in science, and we actually got our year 6 buddies involved with that as well, and that was really fun. Then researching the strengths of materials. So this all comes back to this main thing, which is critical thinking. We want the children to access that higher level of thinking, that questioning. We want them to be critical. We want them to question their questions, and we want them to question what they're learning about. Okay, so critical thinking is a 21st century skill, and the learning to learn movement, another name you might want to write down, is Guy Claxton. He's the critical thinking movement, and if you on the next slide again, I put the Harvard the Project Zero stuff again because it taps into critical thinking. This example here on the screen is actually the children were learning about the fall of the Shang Dynasty in a history lesson. And the children were given different scenarios, and they had to decide which scenario was the likelihood for the fall of the dynasty. And they had to come up and they had to debate that. They had to debate it, and they had to give their reasons why. Bearing in mind that this whole unit of study, this part here, had come at the end of them being completely immersed in the civilization, to the point that they were actually mixed into groups of social classes. So we had groups of like leading, we had warriors, priests, emperors, and they had to then debate from the perspective of that social class. So they had to be, that was the level of criticality there. They were questioning what they'd learned about. And when we told them about what it was, I invite you to look at it, was quite dramatic, the emperor throwing himself into flames, etc. They then questioned that. And that's, they questioned, well, why was this? What is it? And that's, again, you're questioning the questions, you're questioning what you've learned. That's the element of criticality. How can you do that? Question matrix are a fantastic tool. Just go on Google Images and type in question matrix. They're a fantastic scaffold, and the deeper you go to the far right are the kind of deeper level of questions. I call this dicey dialogue. And it's questions on dice. Pretty self-explanatory. You roll the dice and you have to formulate a question. You have to question someone else, question yourself. I've turned it into, as well, I've called it a dialogue dance, where we dance around the classroom and then we stop and we have artifacts in our hands and we question each other. And I've just put that QR code there again for Harvard Project Zero because it's just such a fantastic resource. The next slide is actually one of my last ones, and it's an inquiry cycle. I have literally just taken today a snapshot of the main parts of an inquiry cycle. This is Kath Murdoch's inquiry cycle. It's what the International Baccalaureate's Primary Years Programme actually use to drive their inquiry. So the schools that adopt inquiry-based learning as their main approach utilize this cycle. And we've only really tapped in today broadly over the tuning in, the finding out, the sorting out, the going further. So the tuning in, the provocations, the finding out, the agency, the research, the sorting out, the going further, the critical thinking, going further, questioning what you've already learned. And then that last part, which I just want to kind of talk about now, is that reflecting and acting. And what I will just add is that it's so important to celebrate as well. Celebrate the journey that you've been on with the students, showcase the learning. And that doesn't have to be in the form of work in a book, okay? you know, blog posts. We do showcase events at our school really, really well, really fantastically, and showcasing those learning journeys, showcasing inquiry, showcasing their critical thinking, their questioning, and enabling them to celebrate their achievements. So today we've spoken about provocations, we've spoken about questions, we've spoken about research and being critical thinkers, and that then leading into more questions. And it's a cycle, it just goes round and round and round. But I think what I would just like to leave you with is just to say, don't squelch curiosity. I think that's the most powerful message. Don't squelch it, whether it be in the form of you, as I said, you know, if that siren goes past your classroom, explore that with your children. If they're just curious. But yesterday we were learning about Antarctica, and a couple of the boys were really interested in the Drake Passage, you know, one of the most treacherous routes that ships can cross. So we watched some videos on YouTube of people on cruise ships with the things all falling off the tables and stuff. But that was their curiosity. Tap into that and just try to make some room to really enable those wonderings to really flourish. So yes, thank you for watching and thank you for being involved. Here are some resources. I've got lots of QR codes there. This is just a few. Get down to the library and go and get The Hungry Mind, please. And we've got Trevor Mackenzie's book, Inquiry Mindset. Trevor Mackenzie did have a deal with Amazon and Audible. He does wonderful audiobooks. His whole Inquiry Mindset series, he reads them. And there's a lot of supportive material on there as well. Get on his website. It's got his fantastic sketch notes. And he's done some great podcasts too. Kath Murdoch has a wonderful blog, which it just is written wonderfully and just has so many little sources of inspiration. And I encourage you to getting involved with. I don't think you can. I've actually got these books here, but Getting Personal with Inquiry, the top one, excellent source. I pick up, open on any page, and you'll find a little nugget of information that you'll just want to embed into your practice. We've got bang on 5 minutes left. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that perhaps this has sparked your curiosity to inquire into inquiry. And if you have any questions whatsoever, I would be very curious to know about them and learn more. Thank you so much, everybody.